Hi, this video is to show using pattern Eclipse, which comes in the gold feature, to do a partial row at the bottom. So this is a quilt that's already been quilted, and I just threw it on the rails for example. So for example's sake, we're going to pretend that the pantograph is set up between these two gold borders, okay? And we're going to pretend that this seam line right here is where we want the lowest stitches of our last zone to hit, okay? So I've already placed this zone. When you're using 4-point, you don't have that partial row feature, which if you're able to use the C and the D to adjust it a little bit so that it's not really noticeable, that's fine. But if you aren't able to do that, that's when this would be a really great time to use pattern Eclipse. So that's what we're going to do. So the A corner has already been placed. Our design's in the center there, and we are going to tap on plugins because that's kind of how pattern Eclipse works. You go ahead and place your zone and do everything. Pattern Eclipse is what you last do before you would stitch. So we're going to tap on pattern Eclipse. And you can see that our pantograph design is outlined in green, okay? So what we're going to do is we're literally going to create a rectangle, but it has to extend out a little outside these green lines. So we're going to come over here to this seam line, which we had said this is where we want the lowest stitches to hit, and I'm going to move my needle on past this purple edge to the left there, okay? But even with where I would want the lowest stitches to hit, and I'm going to tap add, and then I'm just going to come down and say add. I'm getting past that green line. I probably moved more than I needed to. I'm going to come over here and say add, and making sure I'm clearing that right edge. If I didn't, I could say remove and move my needle a little more and say add again. And I'm going to come up, and I want to be again to the right edge of this purple seam line here, and even with this seam, and I'm going to say add again. And you can see my line is outside of the green because that's what's important, that it be outside the green line, and it auto connects back to where we started. Sew continuous needs to be checked. You could do the Sew Eclipse border, but that's going to give you a nasty little stitch line. You still get a stitch line with Sew continuous, but it's worse with Sew Eclipse border. So have Sew continuous selected and tap on OK. It takes you back to your quilting interface screen, and you can see where it trimmed off that lower part. You probably want to do a trace and just make sure everything is going to start where you want it. So I tap trace, and it should move to the little green dot there. And you get a message with when you're using pattern Eclipse that talks about where there's breaks. You can see that there's breaks along the line. Do you want it to move automatically, or do you want to have manual control? I'm just going to say automatic. And the needle is up. And I was making sure that it was going to start there at the seam line. I'm going to say stop. Go in there, release carriage. And another thing I might want to check is just, move it further down and make sure this line is going to be where I want. So repair pattern, closest stitch. And the needle's up. And I'm making sure that it's over the seam line here. I'm not even sure where it's at, but you could do trace forward and just make sure. If it's not exactly where you want it and you just need to redo it, tap on back, tap on plugins, tap on reset, tap on plugins again, and pattern Eclipse. And then tap on the hexagon with the red X, and it takes your marks away, and then you can reset them, starting over with the add. Just to add on a little bit to what's already been shared, this is in pattern Eclipse, and we started out there and added, and we went there and added, and went there and added, and went there and added, and then this line auto connected back to the start. But if you're familiar with fabric comp, you could in effect do something similar. So right now the needle is at this spot. So what I could do is start moving my needle just down, I'm using this seam line, down this seam line, and say add, and just keep moving a little bit and say add, and I'm going to be sloppy here, okay? And say add, and just keep on going, saying add, and until I get back to the other side. And then if this were a border that wasn't exactly straight, then I would be following a little bit of the curvy in and out of the border so that you would never know it when you finished quilting that last zone. So that's just a way to kind of have fabric comp here when you're still in Pattern Eclipse. Just keep moving your needle and tapping add, and then you're going to get back to the other side, and I'm being very, very sloppy. But yeah, just keep doing that, and it's going to stay auto-connected back to the other side. So so you can see how there's a little divot there. That was actually me being sloppy, but you see what I mean. This could be very useful for when you're stopping because there's a border, just to control exactly how this pantograph is going to stitch down to that line. So I hope that you have found this helpful. And again, thank you, Stephanie Melton, for sharing this great way to use Pattern Eclipse.